It's Elizabeth in France, also Helen is in France, and they're actually working together on Fridays, I've just read. Fantastic.
We have 1 hour for this, or
Yeah.
I think yeah, ish.
Is that okay? Yeah. It doesn't.
Yeah.
If we, I always, allow time officially. I don't actually know what would happen. I don't think there's anybody waiting to come in, but it depends how the whole thing is set up. But you don't have to sort of finish on the second or anything like that. As I say, I book it officially for an hour and a half. But
Okay.
I don't think it's actually might be of interest to some people. IATF, or this big organization, is divided into interest groups, special interest groups, SIGs, and they've decided recently that the individual groups shall pay for Adobe. It's rather strange logic. I mean, we sort of pay ourselves because we're all one association, but so I did a special deal for EVO because there are 12 presentations altogether, and I thought paying by the hour, well, I can't mention online what I thought of by comparison, but so we did a deal and I've got a fixed price, and so we don't have to watch the clock. I need to watch it now, but we're coming up to time, but I'll leave a couple of minutes. People are still coming in. We're up to 11 at the moment. Nobody's in here twice. That happens quite frequently, which is a pity, because if you come back a second time, you bring an echo with you. But seems to be okay. Hello,
Another
Nina.
question while we're waiting.
Yeah, please.
Is there any way to get an MP3 recording rendered from Adobe?
Well, I'm not quite sure if that format is possible, but I can, or anybody who's the person who's set up this event can download it, and then of course can change the format. So directly or indirectly, I suppose the answer is yes. But you would have just have to ask me to do it. But that's. I think in principle it is possible. It just wasn't sure if it comes down as MP3 or 4 or whatever. So in some, yes.
MP4 you can convert.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can find a tool to do that.
Yeah.
It's very convenient for me to listen to people talking because, I can be doing other things. So I listen to a lot of podcasts.
Yeah.
Just follow long road trips, whatever,
Yeah.
So anyway, that's why I always like to get MP3s.
I know that for another program that we use a lot in Second Life, Camtasia, if you put a recording, say from Adobe, into Camtasia, you can actually split the video and the sound. So that almost certainly means you could do it fairly easily from there if you can't do it from within with Adobe, just by taking out the sound. And I had to do that once because somebody who made a marvelous presentation, they were not they risked showing videos of real kids, but they really weren't supposed to, so they didn't want them to stop in the recording. But the session was so good that we kind of doctored it. It took an awfully long time to get rid of the sound sometimes. So you can, I know from experience, not just from theory, that you can separate sound and vision and do different things with both. Okay, we've Vasiliki from Greece, just in the process 10 minutes ago of booking my first holiday in Greece. But in fact, my son-in-law was doing it, so I don't know where we're going, but we're going in May. Very exciting, except that I can't look at the pictures now because we're here. I think I'll give us another minute. I must not forget one's always frightened, at least I am, of forgetting to press the record button. So I'm going to, I know it takes a few moments, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, you have to sort of press twice. So I'm going to press once, then I have to give a summary, which I just type in something. Okay, so that's all set up. So I'm going to say, as I keep on repeating to people, like when I'm saying goodbye to my granddaughter on the phone, I'm going to count from 3 to 1 and then we'll start recording. Before that, however, I must ask, is there anybody present who does not want to be recorded? I must ask this, though I should quickly add that if you say yes, the only thing we can do is say then, sorry, but can you please leave the room? This is just for legal reasons. Since nobody has said they object, I assume it's okay with everybody. So we're going to start recording now. 3, 2, 1. Okay, and we're now recording. So, Vance, fantastic that you are here. Welcome. Welcome everybody else too. 17 of us at the moment. The family's growing quickly. It's fantastic to have Vance. I've met him over the years, but never in person, in Second Life and all over the internet. And I'm pretty sure that most of you here will know of Vance. Let me show off some of my technical skills. I'll fill the screen for a moment and we will disappear, but we're behind this. So you've read this, I hope, that where Vance is a teacher and what he's been doing for the last 20 years. And of course, what most of us, I guess, I certainly associate Vance with the webheads. And this too, for me personally, this second screen I've got here, this is my impression of Vance. I think I've said to him that he's the person who tries to connect everything and everybody with everything and everybody else. And visually, you see that here. Everything is clickable. One thing leads to another. And the modern version of that is that Vance is really trying to log all the webinars that are on it at any point in time. And I guess that approach of networking as many people as possible, I think he's actually possibly also in learning together at the moment, though I'm not quite sure about that. Anyway, that's more
yes,
than...
we are. This is a learning together session for Sunday. Fantastic. Sunday the 26th of January, 2014, which I always say before any learning together session. And I put a link to the calendar there below the link to the slide share.
Excellent. Okay, at this point I shall say over to Vance and I will disappear, but I'll be listening. Over to you, Vance.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That Webheads page that Dennis was showing was kind of the Web 1 version. As Web 2 came along, those Web 1 pages are kind of hard to keep. So now we're working mostly in Web 2 and PBWorks, for example, or lately, boy, Google Communities has really come on to become your interactive portal. That's a real Web 2 portal. So I think I'm going to be... Google Communities is just easy to start. It's very social. So they seem to be the way to go. I'm kind of learning that, though. I'm learning that... I've learned it recently, actually, from EVO. I've been using Google Communities for some time, but I didn't really know how it worked until, you see, you have to do it in order to learn how it works. And then you can see. And so that's one thing we're all learning in Electronic Village Online, EVO, is how these things work. So anyhow, I'm Vance, and I'm going to talk about chaos in learning and how we resolve that chaos. And I've prepared a slideshow here. I guess if I press the next button, it should move. Oh, I suppose, first of all, we're addressing young learners here. Shelley Terrell was on last night and gave a really nice presentation about really young learners. Kids she was teaching in Germany. My wife's a KG1 teacher, so my wife would really have appreciated that presentation. She wasn't here at the time. Anyway, I think for Dennis and I, probably young learners, anyone under 50, 60. So in my own personal situation, I teach pilot cadets at the Khalifa bin Zayed Air College here in Al Ain, UAE. And they're about 18 to 20 years old. They're definitely young learners. They're people that I have to engage. You really must. They're all into Instagram, it seems, these days, and that sort of took me by surprise. I use Instagram, but I didn't realize it had become so popular. I kind of realized that when we came back off holiday, because before when we went on holiday, they were all on Facebook and Twitter, and nobody had Instagram up, but that came on really quickly. So you learn a lot of things from your young learners as well. So anyway, here's a picture of one of our graduation ceremonies. Oh, and by the way, there's a slideshow. Oh, and I put it at the top of the slide just because this always comes up. I don't know how well you can see this. I guess there's a full screen option for you. But I put at the top of the slide the link to the slides. Everyone asks, a lot of people, it's just nice to know that the slides are at slideshare.net/Vance. And if you go there now, you can find this slide presentation. And actually, it would be better if you went along in the slide presentation, because all the links there are clickable. So that's one thing I really like about SlideShare. What is chaos? That's the next slide. The book cover you see there is a book about chaos theory that I happen to have read some years ago. I was looking around for chaos in you can see a Google image search result there. And you actually see a picture of Benoit Mandelbrot. Do you know who Benoit Mandelbrot is? Do you recognize the diagrams at all? Do you know what they're called? I'm looking in case anybody's a real fast typer. No, I got a lot of no's. Those are Mandelbrot diagrams. They're fractals. A fractal is a diagram that, as you zoom in, it becomes more and more detailed. So the chaos is it never ends. It's generated in such a way that it's kind of like a coastline, or you're trying to map a coastline. It could look like a straight line on some maps. The more you zoom in, the more complicated it gets, and it's always composed of, even as the waves are breaking on it, it's changing the coastline. So chaos theory has to do with that. Has to do with the iterations in sets of things, and they make huge computers to try to get back into chaos. And maybe weather might be a chaos system, though I think I'm going to say that George Siemens put it into complex. But anyway, we'll come to that in a moment. But anyway, that's just something about chaos. Chaos. So Stella Baston. I can't remember how I came upon Stella Baston, but somehow I came upon this little mashup that she did on chaos. Different people talking about chaos. One of them was Stephen Downes. And I just heard this and I thought, well, this is really cool. So I made a comment that you can see on the screen. And that was to her, to tell her that I was going to use this video in my presentation tonight, which I commented on some months ago, maybe, or a month ago. And then I got more comments on that from my network. So this is all kind of an illustration of how networks work. And Stella Baston put me onto this. I actually found the video. It was actually hard to find, but she didn't say in her YouTube posting where she got the different links, but she did have a little words across the screen, like Star Wars, So anyway, words across the screen that indicated the conference. So I was able to Google it, and I eventually found it, though it was pretty buried and hidden. But anyway, Stephen is saying here, what we see is chaos. So everything you look at is chaos. Chaos is all around, and the world is chaos. This has implications for teaching, because when we teach, we are trying to sometimes distill things and to simplify them so that we can get points across. But you have to remember that at some point, people have to go out into the world, and what they'll see is chaos. So we have to keep that in mind as we're teaching. And there's a link to that YouTube video right there at the bottom of that slide, which if you're on SlideShare version, you could be looking at right now. Now, this guy, what he's associated with, this is George Siemens. His theory is connectivism, which is MOOCs. Yes, Carol says MOOCs, of course. Connectivism from Benjamin, who featured in that previous, this is Benjamin back here. He's the commenter at the bottom of that page right there. Okay, anyway, that's George Siemens being interviewed by another of my favorite characters, Howard Rheingold. And George, a nice little interview. I think Howard is kind of baiting George. He sort of pretends he doesn't know much about MOOCs, or he keeps asking him, well, for people who don't know more about this, tell us more, So he gets George talking in a really nice way. Fizzy water with Ribena in it, blackcurrant drink. Okay, well, what does George say? He says, I actually took the trouble to transcribe this. I can't see that on my screen very well. Okay, anyway, he says, I'm not aware of any research, actually, that says that linear structure produces better outcome than more chaotic meandering structure. Our intent is to argue that the experience of learning, making some of that chaos, is actually the heart of the learning experience. Making sense of that chaos, sorry. I'm trying to find this in a larger view on my other computer, but anyway. But if an instructor makes sense of that chaos for you and gives you all the reading and sets the full path in place for you, then you are eviscerating the learner's experience. Because now you've made sense for them, and all you've told them is how to walk the path that you've already prepared for them. So when it comes to complexity, he says, I'm a great fan of letting learners hack their way through that path and getting the value of that learning experience and that sense-making process. So basically he's saying this is deeply rooted in George's approach to teaching, that there must be chaos in order for deep learning to occur. So we're going to talk a little bit about those points. Dennis, I suppose if there's something in the text chat that comes up, you could interrupt me. It might pass quickly.
Yeah, I will do. I'm doing a lot of it in chat. I will, yeah. What does eviscerating mean?
Okay. Eviscerate means to rip the guts out of something, to take an animal and remove its intestines so you can prepare it. So to eviscerate the learning experience by doing the work of learning too much, by simplifying things too much, the learner is not have to go resolve the chaos by him or herself. Okay, anyway, this is a picture from the old Webheads page of Susan Nyrup. Actually, this is actually not from a Webheads page. It was from one of our Webheads in Action online convergences, which some of you might remember. This one was in 2007, and Susan Nyrup was one of our early Webheads. And this is an avatar that she created while she was chatting with us one time in a graphic space. And anyway, she said that interacting with us was chaos navigation. But later she changed that, and we wrote it here in the link that you can follow if you're in the SlideShare version. She changed that to intuitive chaos navigation. Now the slide I've just pulled up is a tag, a Twitter cloud, I guess you could say, of everyone who is tweeted on the tag Rhizo14, which is the tag for rhizomatic learning, which is a MOOC that's going on right now. A lot of us in this room are in it. I'll bet Doris is in it. I'm sure Benjamin is in it. Carol is in it. Anybody else? You want to say, I'm in that MOOC? If you're in it, you can register yourself in the text chat and we'll see. Well, anyhow, once you take what seems chaotic and you put a tag on it and you present it in a diagram like this, it's chaos in a way, but it's also navigable. So, and it's intuitive. It makes it, I don't know, anyway, it clarifies things a little bit. So we're looking for ways to do what Susan said, intuitive chaos navigation. So what do learners need in an era of accelerating change? Future Shock was a book I read back in the 70s. Alvin Toffler was describing how, a very prescient book actually, how change is accelerating, that notion that change accelerates. And in fact, by now we should be totally out of control. But apparently something kind of put the brakes on things, where we learned to adjust a little bit. But another, Fish and McCloud have this Shift Happens video, and actually this slide that picture is from one of the updated versions. It says, we're currently preparing students for jobs that don't exist yet. And that's part of the accelerated change that's taking place. We all know that. I mean, there's some statistics in that say, for example, how many university degrees that are being pursued right now didn't exist a year or two ago. So there's also a book called A New Culture of Learning by Thomas and Brown that talks about, now I've paraphrased it here, but anyway, they talk about teaching, the old adage about teaching someone to fish, as opposed to giving the person fish. Well, if you're teaching them to fish, that's good strategy, only assuming that fish stocks last and that radical new techniques for catching them won't be required in the person's lifetime. So in other words, you're teaching something as basic as fishing, it could be that that person is still going to have to keep up, relearn, and redefine the notion of fishing. And I guess you could say that's kind of happening because, fishermen can still catch fish, but there are ways of harvesting the sea that are much more advanced. That if you really want to do it on a scale, you have to adapt. So anyway, coping with chaos, I just grabbed a few things off the top of my head. You have to have strategies for doing that. You have to have literacy skills, because these literacy skills I have called multiliteracies. Maybe there's transliteracy skills nowadays. You have to be able to articulate to other people about what you're doing, and that's what puts some of these higher level learning strategies out of reach of some of our less literate learners. You have to be able to know the meta language of cognition and what you're trying to accomplish. What's the goal? You have to be able to articulate your way to the goal. You need a network, and basically all that comes down to connectivism. So this is just a picture I grabbed off the internet. I can't remember what I Googled, but I thought it was kind of representative. I've included the link to the picture and also to its Creative Commons license there at the bottom of the screen. Make sure that what goes on the internet is, that we can put it there. Anyway, well, how do we inculcate these skills in young learners? Well, as Stephen Downes said, teachers model and demonstrate, learners reflect and practice. And I've often said, probably repeated, that David Warlick says there's such a thing as a master learner. To me, a master learner does all four of those things. But basically, what you are doing to pass these skills on to young learners is that you have to get them yourself. You have to learn them yourself. Now, I've just put up a few things here. We're doing that right now. Right across the top of the screen is the Multimook why young learners, teaching young learners SIG logos there. They're together because this is a Multimook session. It's a learning together session. It's a YLT SIG session. It's an EVO session. So we're all here doing this. These other logos have to do. EdTech Mojo is something that some people in the UAE just set up. It's just something we just got started. Only 5 participants at the moment. We're still putting it together. The Techo there is the logo for the TESOL Arabia EdTech SIG. So basically, these are just ways that we come together all the time, and these things are just also growing. The opportunities are growing exponentially. So there's really becoming a huge abundance of these. In fact, I'm really surprised myself in that calendar that I'm keeping up, whose link I put into the chat earlier. How it used to be that there were a couple of these things a week that I was aware of, but now there's several a day. It's just incredible how many. Google Hangout has made it possible for people to just start a Hangout, record it, webcast it, stream it. This is so simple, and people are doing it using these tools. So, to bring this sort of to my personal experience, which is the thing I can best talk about, I suppose, or best root myself in and therefore communicate to others, something I call SMALL, Social Media Assisted Language Learning. If you are on the slide share and you click on that link, you'll find a book chapter that I recently submitted for publication, so I can't really, but it's in a Google Doc. But it's at the end of a document which is on SMALL, Social Media Assisted Language Learning. I put that document together because I actually came upon someone else using that acronym, and he was from Malaysia. He had a slide share. I found it in slideshare.net, and I was surprised. I thought, wow, this guy, he's actually using this same acronym. So I communicated with him, and he was happy to find someone else who had also used it. He had a little basis for now referring to it. But anyway, I wrote a book chapter kind of about it, and about how Webheads in Action, actually we started Webheads in Action as an EVO session, Electronic Village Online, and we were doing these, I mentioned earlier, the Webheads in Action online convergences. We did 3 of them biannually for between 2005 and 2009. That became such a strain that we started learning together, or I did anyway. I can say we because it involves all of you people who are coming on to give presentations since 2010 now, so that's it's about 150 of them. So far, we have an archive, and Multimook is an EVO session that's kind of evolved through this whole process. So, and there you can read about how they all go together in the book chapter, who's linked at the bottom there. We're coming on to training versus learning. So we have to distinguish these two things, training and learning. For example, I happen to be a dive instructor. And when I'm teaching diving, I train. I don't teach people deep understandings, except in the sense of depth in the ocean. But my students learn English. I don't teach them. There's a link on that slide to an article that I wrote after giving a talk in Cairo. And at the talk, I said that there's no such thing as an English teacher. I meant it to be provocative. There's only English learners. There really is no such thing as an English teacher, and I'll come into that in a minute. It's because language is a chaos domain. It's a domain of chaos. It's something that you can't really break it down into things that you can actually teach. You can train it. Now, if you want someone to pass a test, you can train. Let me see if I can get my wife to do something about the cat. Hang on a second. Maybe she's not here. I guess that's the problem. We're hearing key presses, Dennis. You might want to mute your microphone while you're not talking. Okay. So anyhow, chaos in language classes. Should we avoid chaos in language classes? Is that a good thing? Let's put yourself, here's a language class. If you're the teacher of this class and someone is telling you that you should let learners learn in a very deep way, and there are certain strategies for for doing something, training or teaching. Do you train or teach, or or do you train or do they learn? In other words, if you're at the head of that class, you might be kind of on the training side of it. It's really hard to engage such a large class. I'm sure there are people who could do this kind of thing, but I'm thinking back on my language experiences. I used to be in Spanish classes like this, and I remember I learned, for example, to sing Solito Lindo, but at the end of the course, we went to dinner at a Mexican restaurant, and none of us could really order. The idea was we were supposed to order in Spanish, but no one could really speak Spanish. But we could be trained to do certain things like sing songs, So some things you can learn, but you're not really, it depends on how the methods are and how you're actually engaging with the material. But then another experience I had too was more recently. I went to a community college where I was again in a class almost as big as that. Maybe it was at the community college, and the teacher was teaching people, sort of telling people that you're going to do well in this course. This is what you need to know for the test. I'm going to teach you these verb conjugations. I'm going to test you on them. And then he would go around the room and he'd get people to respond in a kind of drill and practice way. And when he came to me, I'm such a nutcase, So he came to me and I responded off. I kind of tried to communicate with him, and it really threw him off. He got kind of angry with me, and moved on to the next person. And anyhow, so there wasn't enough chaos in it for me. Okay. Anybody know who this guy is? Can anyone pronounce this word? Kinefin? Actually, I can pronounce the word because I listened to the video. This is David Snowden talking about Kinefin. And Kinefin is a framework by which he describes how different types of problems, simple, complicated, complex, and chaotic, and how to manage those problems. And there's an interesting interface between the simple and the chaotic. When you go from simple to chaotic, a mess occurs. If you watch this video, and you can watch it by clicking on the link below the video, you can hear him tell you about that. If people go from simple to chaotic, they get really lost. That's what happens to language learners. When you're learning language in a simple way, and then you go to the chaos that you see, that Stephen Downes says you see when you go to a foreign country, man, such a break. Incredible. There's a cliff there. He says there's a cliff. You'll notice that in the diagram, there's actually a cliff there. So you fall off the cliff. Talking about MOOCs. This is Dave Cormier. He gave us a talk about a year ago at one of our last renditions of our Multimooc session. Multimooc is not a course, therefore it can't be a MOOC. It also doesn't really have enough people in it, so it's not a MOOC itself, but it's about MOOCs. It tries to study MOOCs. So last year we had Dave Cormier come and talk to us, and there's a link to the recording right there. And he used this Kinefin diagram to explain how MOOCs, he thought, addressed the left side of the diagram. That is, MOOCs are not very good for simple and complicated things. They're better for complex and chaotic. If you're trying to crack a complex or chaotic nut, then a MOOC is a good plan for it. Now, George Siemens in one of his talks was talking about what's a simple thing, what's a complicated thing, what's complex. A simple thing would be like a math problem, 2 plus 2. There are simple things that you can predict their outcomes very easily. Complicated, George gave a good example. He said, suppose you take your motorcycle apart in your living room and then you put it back together and you've got a couple of parts left over. That's complicated, Complex, he said, is more like the weather, which I was saying, according to chaos theory, maybe it's more chaotic, but still, it doesn't have predictable outcomes. Chaotic, David Snowden says that's where tyranny arises, when chaos happens to manage it. A tyrant steps in. That's maybe the only way to do that. There's my wife, Bobby, in the background. I guess the cat's going to become a little bit more silent. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Fine. How are you?
I'm fine.
Hi.
Yes, okay. Put that there. Okay, thank you. All right. So, we have to distinguish the different kinds of MOOCs. We have XMOOCs and, Benjamin just put a link in there. Okay, well, I hope we can retrieve it. Can we retrieve these links then? People put them in the text chat. Tempted to click on it. Okay, I did. It's a book from Amazon. It's Complex System and Applied Linguistics. Complex Systems and Applied Linguistics. Interesting. Okay. All right. So anyhow, there are two flavors of MOOCs. One is XMOOC and one is CMOOC. CMOOC means connectivist MOOC. Stephen Downes, I think, made up the name XMOOC as a play on edX. I didn't list so many of them because on the slides it would cover up the slide, but there's a whole bunch of them, like Coursera, edX, Udacity, that are more training. Now there's some interesting, actually people are doing interesting work in that area. I mean, star professors are flipping their classrooms. They're recording their lectures in a very interesting way using good multimedia. And in fact, actually, George Siemens in a recent talk, I think it was in South America somewhere, it was an hour and 20 minutes long or something like that. He said that if he were going to start a course for a new class of freshmen, he said he would trash all his old materials and he'd have students sign up for a course at Coursera. And he said trust me, they can make better materials than I can. So we'll use those materials and then we'll talk around them. That's what this course will be about. I'll assess, I'll do, all that for you. So, but a CMOOC is something different. A CMOOC is actually what I'm more interested in. It's the kind where rhizomatic learning is a good example of one that's happening right now. In fact, in MultiMOOC, which I explained was not a MOOC, we're actually moving into rhizomatic learning. Rhizo 14, that's its tag. We're moving into it at least I am. I don't know about the rest of the participants, but I'm going to learn about MOOCs by going into Rhizo 14. So that's my Coursera. That's where the materials are coming from, that they can do it better than I can, and I want to learn from that and learn with people who want to interact in EVO. Okay, so having explained that, this is our course. The course, the MultiMOOC course, has a Google community page that I think is the nicest one, and we're studying things like on the right side of the screen you see the Google community portal. On the left side of the screen you see searches on two hashtags. One of them is actually a combination. It's MultiMOOC or EVO MLIT. I have two of them because EVO MLIT is the community tag, and MultiMOOC is the tag we're using for this course. But if people use both of them, if you're going to use one of them, just use MultiMOOC. But I'm not sure if there are any community tie-ins with EVO MLIT. But anyhow, if you do a search on those on that tag, then you come up with everyone's tweets. If you do a search on Rhizo 14, you come up with the tweets on the right of the left-hand diagram. So anyway, you can try that. But that's our course about MOOCs. And here is an actual MOOC. This is Rhizo 14. This is the peer-to-peer university portal in one part of this collage. Understanding how they work is ineffable. What that means is that it's so hard to explain how it works. I've just got a snippet here. In fact, this is actually from today. When I got home from work, I went onto the Rhizo Facebook page, and I think the first thing I saw, somebody was asking, how can I get an aggregation? How can I use RSS to pull in everyone's blogs? And so this lady, McNess, I can't read it, it's too small on my screen. But anyway, she said that, oh, that's been done here. And she pointed to this other person's blog that you can see if you click on that link. And he's already in the sidebar to the right of his blog post, as you can see there. He's aggregated quite a lot of blogs, and mine's there. So you get, how does this work? It works, but it's a berry bush. Basically, you have to think of it as a berry bush, or the way media works. I'll explain. A berry bush, when you go to a berry patch and you want to fill your bucket with berries, you don't go after all the berries. You don't go after the hard ones to get. You just take the ones that are right there, and they look really nice, and you just take those. And then you fill your bucket and you leave. Okay. If you're going fishing, you don't worry about all the fish that you miss. You throw your line in, you pull out a fish, you got a couple of fish, maybe one for your neighbor, and you don't worry about all the fish you miss. Media has always been like that. You've got a radio, a television. Right now, you're here, you're missing a football game somewhere, or you're missing a quiz show, or you're missing something. Something's going on in the media all the time. You don't worry about the things. You don't even think about it. You're so used to thinking about media in this way. But it's been an adjustment for people to think about their communities, like their Twitter feed. I mean, how many tweets do you read of all the ones that you receive every day? I mean, I probably get thousands of them, and I probably read 3 or 4. I don't know. I have ways of filtering them. I read the ones that are tagged, but filtering is the way that you have to deal with this. But basically, you don't go into a MOOC thinking, oh, I'm missing so much. You go in there, find the berry. Oh, very nice. Ah, yes, I learned something today. That's how you. That's the feeling of a MOOC, a CMOOC. A MOOC, it's not trying to teach you something that is top down. It's you driving it. From Dave Cormier articulates that very well in some of the videos that he's done for Rhizo MOOC, Rhizo 14. So here's another example. This is something that, I listened to one of those videos and I heard him say something about Tweet Explorer. He said that was such a neat tool. He said, click on the diagram and connect the nodes. And I went looking for it. I couldn't find it. I finally posted on Facebook, as you can see up in the upper right-hand corner. You can follow the arrow down. Well, basically, someone told me, gave me some clues about that. And so eventually, and the link at the bottom is my blog post where I explain in greater detail how this happened. But eventually, I managed to get Tweet Explorer to give us a tag cloud of all the tweets for EVO, MLIT, and Multimooc. And now, there's the kicker. When I did that, look at I got responses in the lower left-hand corner. You see the responses that I got from people in the community. So, man, you're getting, you're finding out something, you're learning, you're accomplishing, you're getting rewarded, you're getting people recognizing this. That's just that's a great learning experience. So I'm trying to describe what it feels like to be in a CMOOC. Now, this is the tag cloud from Rhizo 14. So you can see there's quite a lot of interaction going on there. Dave himself says right from the start, I'm not going to be looking at all this. I'm not going to be directing it. In fact, the course is called Community as Curriculum. So the curriculum is really meant to be coming from the community. This course, I've told them, and I don't know if anybody noticed, but anyway, this is a course that practices what it preaches. Multi-MOOC is a course that preaches what this course practices. So that's what I'm doing right now. Okay, how is chaos resolved? Here I have a picture of the page of Shelley Terrell's group. It's more moderators than her. She was speaking on YLT SIG last night in this very venue about 24 hours ago. And I just used it as an example because it's a really nice page. I learned a lot from this Google community page. It does, I think the things that the MOOCs try to do, if you look at the bottom of that slide, you'll see a link to Success in a MOOC by Dave Cormier. It's a little series of videos that he produced, but they're really well done. And he's also got another video that explains how he did it. And so anyway, they're very interesting to explore that stuff. But to cope with chaos, or to cope with a MOOC, you follow these 5 steps. You orient on the problem, declare what you're going to do, declare yourself, declare who you are. You start networking. You find out what the network knows about this problem, and then you cluster. Cluster means you find a few people that you're that are into the same things you are. That's probably in this slide that I showed you back here. I've just gone 2 slides back. At the bottom left, that's a cluster of people that are we're starting to understand that we are interested in the same things. And then you focus. That means you bring it to a conclusion. You have a project, and that's actually why I chose this the EV crafting the ePerfect textbook. Crafting the ePerfect textbook is the name of this this MOOC. It's a MOOC because it's got almost 600 participants, and that's just in the Google community. Well, all their interaction is funneled through the Google community. So they followed. First of all, the first week was on orientation, and then they declared what they're going to do. They're all going to prepare a book, and they start. And of course, they're networking with each other while they do that. What they're trying to do is break into small groups, find out who's interested in what book, and actually create one. Learn how to create one. So they're clustering as they do that, and then the focus will be on coming up with an ebook, collaborating on it. And so I thought that's a really good example of using this kind of theory for, for learning. So, as far as what I'm doing in my work, I sometimes have opportunities to collaborate. I'm working in kind of a restricted place. It's an air college, so it's kind of hard to get out. But there's another lady in Taiwan. Her name is Deline, and she's been interested. She works at the Taiwan Air College, and we're starting to make some inroads, sort of into getting our students and teachers together. Our teachers are not that up on this to where they would do it spontaneously, but they're quite interested in what I'm showing them. So I'm hoping that that we can do more in that. I don't know if Daleen is here tonight. She was in a previous EVO session. Daleen, if you're here, you might just say hi in the text chat. Okay. Anyway, another thing that I found was very interesting is, especially since I'm at an air college, is drones for schools. Now this is an interesting project because it's basically started. I think. Well, actually, I've talked to Alex about that. The picture in the orange that you see there is an avatar picture for Alex Hayes, who is doing some really interesting work on wearable technologies, valence technologies, surveillance and surveillance, and he's just done a PhD on these topics. And so he's quite interested in technology and how it applies to to education, in particular drones for schools. Actually, he's changed the name of that project to Drones for Good. What this does is it identifies drone technology as one of these things that education has. It's a job that hadn't been invented yet some time ago, and something that students in our school systems need to learn how to do. They need to learn more about this technology. And also, these articles here are how some of the useful ways that drones are used. There are some very sinister aspects to drones. Actually, I saw that in one of my feeds the other day that Noam Chomsky has given a talk just recently to somebody on technology and education, and he started out by saying, a hammer doesn't care if you're driving a nail or if you're hitting someone over the head with it. The hammer is just a tool, right? So the drones are also, they're used in a very bad way, as a very bad hammer to kill people sometimes, but they're also can be used in a good way, to respond to accidents or something like that, for example. In any event, so this is a little project that he's taking from a consortium in Australia that's calling itself Drones for Good, and he's just started a Google community and put a lot of interesting things there. I think that's a good place to go if you're interested. If you have people in STEM studies, so engineering students, things like that. So this could be an interesting resource. Now, actually, Alex Hayes, also has some very interesting images for wearable technology, and I was looking for an image to kind of close out this presentation, and I was hoping to find one of his really striking images on wearable technology. I came instead on an interview that he had just done on January 14th, and I'm not sure who the lady is. I can't read all that, but if you can, the link is there at the bottom, the link to his blog post where you can play the YouTube video. But she's wearing Google Glass, and characteristically, Alexander actually has come on to Learning Together and talked to us a little bit about Google Glass. So I was just looking for something to illustrate the slide. This is my conclusion slide, to resolve the present chaos. In other words, to conclude. I've come to the conclusion that we need to rethink learning. So there you've got a lady wearing Google Glass. You're going to be wearing these things at one time, sometime soon. They're not for sale yet. They're still they're given out to developers, or they're being sold to developers, but they're not widely distributed yet. The second thing is flip everything. So basically, I mentioned flipping. People who are doing some of the best MOOC work are, especially in institutional settings, are recording their materials and then letting students have access to them. There's a flipped classroom. That's been applied to flipped university. Flipping is really a good thing, I think, especially we have these abilities to have portals where you can put things up for students. You should be thinking in terms of setting things out for students in portals with links they can click on, that they can access from home, that they can explore as homework or before a class, or as an assignment before a class, or even as some people who talk about how they use these things. Some students turn up prepared, so she can work with the students that are prepared, and the ones who aren't prepared can go and bone up on the materials and come and join the other group. Another thing, how many of you have participated in MOOCs? Maybe we could just have a show of hands. I'm not sure how you show hands here. Anyway, that's something everyone should do. We should all participate in MOOCs, because you'll learn something from it. You'll learn, yay, Mary May has joined a MOOC. And Jeff, all right, now I see how it works. This is cool. Okay, and the next thing, join colleagues regularly online, like we're doing right now. We're coming together. There's so many opportunities. I mentioned that there's many of these events going on every day. Go to learningtogether.pbworks.com and you can find other calendars that will point you to these things. You need to join these sessions and learn from one another. And join and form communities of practice. So, well, Webheads is one, but there are many communities. Go into Google Communities, you'll find them. Google Plus, good source of communities. Lots of attractive communities to join. Facebook groups having to do with education. LinkedIn. You can get involved with other. You can expand your network through communities of practice. And last but not least, empower your students to be creative. I think what I was showing you in some of what I'm getting from RISO 14, I'm getting a problem that I'm trying to resolve. I get some clues to go and crack the problem, and I get congratulated. So I feel empowered. My goals in the course are very narrow. I'm narrow. I mean, well, they're not. I'm not. They're within. They're reasonable. I have reasonable goals. That is, just go in the course and get something out of it and be happy with that. But anyway, basically, people like to create. They like to feel that they can do something. They like to learn something they can use, and they like to be congratulated for having accomplished that. Okay, well, this last slide is for young learners who appreciate these things. This is just to tell you that the slides here are on slideshare.net/VanceS. Everything I do is open. I've set the Creative Commons license on it so that it's share alike and attribution share alike, which means you can do anything with it as long as you share it however you share it in the same way, free, that I've shared it, and you have to say where you got it. That's the only thing. This is an interesting picture. I just came across it. It's the droids are looking at Google. Where is the droid we are looking for? So if you go to the picture at the link at the top of the page and click on that link, it will take you to the picture on Flickr. In Flickr, there's a link right at the Google search line that you can click on, and it takes you to the Google search. So it shows you what the droids are about to find. Okay, well, thank you very much. We've got some time for questions, I suppose, and I'm quite happy to stay and answer a couple of them. Boolean search becoming more relevant these days, says Benjamin. Yes, in fact, actually, we've been talking a bit about this guy, James O'Reilly, who is spamming a lot of EVO sites. We found out that we can search on, like, my search tag, my search line on Twitter is EVO MLIT or Multimook minus collaborative, which is the blog that James tweets on. So it just removes all his spam. So yeah, Boolean search is a good thing to know about.
Vance, I don't know if you notice in these questions for Vance, but I'll read it out anyway. Nina writes under questions for you, English grammar is certainly chaos despite ESL's attempts to organize it. What would you say to that?
Well, yes, that's exactly the point I was trying to make. Language is a chaotic problem, and that's exactly it. I mean, you can read The Language Instinct by Steven Pinker, where he shows how he tries to get at the depth of the understandings we don't have about language. Where does it come from? For example, mute people who sign before puberty have a completely different concept of signing after lateralization takes place. People who have aphasics who try to relearn language past a certain state make a mess of their syntax, and everyone else just seems to know it. So this is these are aspects of language that we can't explain. We can try to define it, but it's definitely, I think it's chaotic. I think that's really why you can't teach a language. You can simplify it, you can train, You can, but you basically you put people into a situation as a teacher where they can learn. So you give them lots of, you make them, you have them communicating, you have them interacting with surroundings of the target language. And if you can do that successfully and get them interested in that kind of thing, then they're going to teach themselves the language.
There's a book I've just, because I'm off camera, I could run around the room and find it, that really sort of runs parallel to much of what Vance has been saying. I'm sure you've heard of the people. I'll try and write it up in a minute. Diana Larson Freeman and Nick Cielis wrote a book. It's a collection of articles on language and complex adaptive systems. And of course, they too take the view that, yeah, this is chaos theory is involved here too. And there are serious linguists out there who say that the grammar, if I dare mention that word, because it's my hobby horse, grammar in the sense that so many in the education world think of it, actually doesn't exist. The idea that, of course, we have this itch to explain the phenomena in front of us, and nowhere more than in the grammar, rules that tell you what's right and what's wrong. But actually, it isn't like that. It's the Dutchman whose name I might come up with, the linguist, argues language, it's statistical. It's a question of how many millions of instances an individual has heard, and they abstract from what they've heard, what everybody understands around them. And that's pretty chaotic. That's the real point. I'll try and feed this book in to the URLs and links by Diana Larson Freeman.
Yeah. Bill Labov did a lot of interesting work showing that Black English in the United States, researching those subjects, that their language was grammatical, even though it wasn't the grammar of the power class. And there's also really interesting things. Though one neat thing from Steven Pinker's book, he talks about Newspeak and how in 1984, Big Brother was trying to create a language that would prevent thought, but he reaches the conclusion through interesting arguments that that would not happen, because the children of Newspeak speakers would creolize the language. They would find ways to express themselves. There's been a lot of studies of creolization of languages. I used to go to the University of Hawaii, and the department next to the ESL department was studying Creoles. And really interesting things, even children of mute people are learning a different way to sign, a more expressive, subtle, nuanced way to sign than their signing parents. So it's, there's definitely a grammar, but and the speakers of that language create it. And if they have to do it themselves from a pidgin, let's say, and creolize it, they will invent a language that everyone follows the conventions. So there's a grammar, but how you can, after the fact, describe that grammar, that's hard.
Sorry for all the bashing. I just wanted. Oh, has it got in? Yes. Yeah, but I don't want to. Carry on.
Oh, I was just going to respond to Maddie Fall's shouted post. Says that you need realia or pictures to teach language. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. You need to have real language input. That's what teaches the language. It's the learners figuring out what's the norm from what they're hearing that allows them to adjust their minds around the proper way to speak the language. I mean, you can't really tell people how to speak it. You have to put them in enough situations where they'll internalize. Anyway, so I agree with that. And John Higgins defined realia in language as anything that wasn't written by a language teacher for the purpose of teaching the language. So.
Yes. Okay, is there anybody else who wants to put a direct question, or is there anything we've missed? I put it in myself, but it was partly because of what I was picking up in the chat. It is, I thought of the PhD student just as sort of typical example. Those of us who want to read up on something, let's put it that way, it used to sort of be possible. Nowadays, if you look for a reference on Google, you get a million examples of what's relevant. How do we all cope with that? How can you choose, if you've got to choose, even what you want to learn about? Vance.
Yeah, you have to have a filter system. If it's research, though, I mean, you've always had this problem. I mean, Michael Long did some really interesting studies about the research underlying the research that underlied the research, of finding that a lot of theory was carried down from compromised research to begin with. So even in books, it's hard. It's not really a problem just on the internet. You do have to make sure there is the additional problem of people on the internet being able to, at least with publishers, you have a gatekeeper. But on the internet, anybody can publish anything, and a lot of wild stuff gets up there. Yeah. A lot of our students go to the Onion and think that's, they'll quote from it without realizing.
Yeah.
I just one was caught out recently. Go ahead.
I've just spotted another question from Nina, if I can put it to you. She writes, many of us...
Can we give these people microphones? Can we give them the mics?
That is difficult.
Could they?
It's difficult to handle and goes wrong. That's what our experience.
Okay.
We're understaffed today. Sorry. Returning to Nina, she says that many agree with you, Vance, but we're constrained by the systems we work in to teach in an ordered way. How do you, Vance, implement your beliefs about chaos in your classroom?
Yeah, well, I don't really. I implement my beliefs about chaos with other teachers, but this is the reality for a lot of people. The slide I've just put back up on the screen. And certainly if you're in my situation too, I can't really, my students, they don't have the skills. I can't remember what I did with that slide. They don't have the literacy skills. They're not able to articulate themselves. They're not able to understand when you're trying to tell them, this is what you need to be doing to learn a language, let's say. Their idea is that you're going to give them the language, and that's not going to happen. They're going to have to, move into the chaos side of it in order to really learn. And so yeah, that's a difficult one. When we're training each other, we come to a better understanding of the solutions to the problem, or we come to even an understanding of the problem. And the way we learn is and if you look at lots of, say, the K-12 groups, the K-12 online conference, let's say, that takes people from around the world, teachers in the K-12, they're doing really some interesting things, implementing their doing Skype calls between kindergarten classes and things like that. So there's a lot of that stuff that gets implemented, gets done. And even in Webheads, we've got people from Amazonia getting in touch with. We've got Ayat and Maria in Argentina and Egypt who've come together, brought their classes together. They got together themselves, become good friends. We all follow that kind of activity. There's quite a lot of it that goes on, that bringing students together in spaces that will let them learn from one another. So, it's possible. You just have to find, like those last two slides I put up. They're really this is about as good as it gets where I am in my real class. This is something that I've actually got a class of students that's going to be kind of hard to teach next year. They're already past the IELTS. They have to get to matriculate from the course. So I think that in order for us to engage them, we're going to have to get into this kind of thing. I think, we're going to have to move into real areas that will, give them some real information to sink their teeth into.
Yeah.
Real people too.
Again, just quoting Nina there, she, I think, thinking probably of chaos, saying that, of course, there are even adults who like an ordered classroom, find it reassuring. I mean, there are many aspects to this, but I guess you can present chaos in an orderly fashion. I mean, it has to do probably with your relationship with the learners, doesn't it? Can you do that, Vance? A spontaneous question. Can you present chaos in an orderly fashion?
Yeah, no, these are very good questions, and that's actually why I had that slide there with the classroom, because that's the reality. You try to tell these students or their parents that you're going to use, confuse these people in order for them to set their to get the concept. You obviously have to start simple. You have to start with the simple and move into the complicated and the complex, and then into the chaos. So people have to go through that. I mean, I've also tried learning other languages. Let's take Japanese, for example. You start off by learning the hiragana and katakana, and you have to learn to read sentences, and then you're sort of moving into you can't communicate with people. Forget that. You're just learning the basic grammar. Even I learned that using to learn the symbols, I used computer programs that were kind of flashcards, and that I found very helpful. Whereas in my own language, or teaching English, I didn't see that kind of thing would benefit people. But when you're using these techniques to learn a language, then you see where you need to go through the steps. And so, yeah, I agree that you definitely have to have the right learner who has the right literacy skills. This is not for just anybody. It's for self-motivated people who want to learn, who would appreciate an opportunity to learn something. So if you've got that kind of student, you can use some of these techniques. But I wouldn't even say they're techniques, but you can use this framework. But we need to find techniques. But a lot of people have found them, through the examples I've just given. You can go to any recorded K-12 online conference from 2006 onwards, and you'll find just amazing presentations, all recorded, all online. A guy who started a cinema in Second Life, let's say, and that would be a good thing for Machinima, Machine EVO. Set up a cinema where people can go in and it's scripted to just play the machinimas, but people can enter a space and sit there and do it. Yeah. It just goes on all the time. That's cool, huh?
Yeah. I think I'm glancing at my watch. I fear that I must, if I can, act symbolically, and in other words, appear. There we are. As I say, I'm never quite sure what's going on behind us electronically, and it would be very indecorous if we were thrown out. So just say, is there are there a last couple of questions or remarks that you would like to put to Vance in writing? I'm just looking to see if there is any last thing. Okay. I don't see anything yet.
At this point,
yeah, Vance.
She says we have to motivate our students who would rather be playing soccer. So in that case, you integrate soccer somehow.
Yeah.
That's obviously something they're interested in. So you can maybe motivate them through soccer.
Yeah. Yes, you can. There's Andrew Wright, who many of you may know, who's actually on the YLTC list, and loves discussing things in old-fashioned yoo-hoo groups. He comes back and back again to examples drawn from football, and especially if you're teaching young people, I guess. The more you can do the sort of thing that they like doing, you can see perhaps that they think they're having fun, but they might actually be learning something. I can't sort of footnote it, but I've come across once or twice references to the effectivity of focusing the learning task away from what is the real task, so that the learners think they're doing one thing, but in fact they're learning, as it were, without realizing it. It's an interesting idea to explore too.
That's gamification. Gamification,
Yeah.
how to create an environment in your class that's a game that they'll play and they'll learn language while they're doing that and enjoy doing it.
I don't know if...
Oh, there's a good one. Some guy presented at TESOL. He did a plenary speech at TESOL, and he had a kind of game. Does anybody, maybe Nina remembers it, what was the name of the game that the guy had his students, the World Peace Game, I think it was called. Maybe it was a World Peace Game? Anyway, it's he had it set up in his classroom, a three-dimensional board space. Students had certain rules, and they learned how to interact, basically. Pretty amazing. I think if it's the World Peace Game, you'd be able to Google it.
Yeah.
He's given a TED Talk on the topic.
Okay, there's something to search with. But for the moment, Vance, thank you fantastically. We can all go away and carry on thinking. Thanks very much. Greetings to the cat. And this I will again count down, and we will stop the recording. I'll leave the room open for a minute or two so you don't get thrown out into outer space. Vance, once again, thanks tremendously. One.
Well, thanks
two.
a lot for the opportunity. I really appreciate your interacting with you again, Dennis.
Great. Thanks a
One
lot.
of these days we'll pop to the pub.
Yeah, we'll meet up in real life. Okay, off we go. Stop the recording.